Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Dream Career Talk Show. Dream Career Talk Show is about building your dream career, which is much beyond getting a job. Here on this show, we are going to have industry experts from various domains who will be sharing their knowledge, their experiences, their challenges, their failures, and success so that it can help others in their career journey. This show is to help corporate professionals expand their context, get clarity, direction, hope, inspiration, and of course, the right steps to build their dream careers. Now, this episode is very special. It is about one of the most trending and the latest technologies, Docker and Kubernetes. It is one of the most trending one in the DevOps space, and many organizations are embracing them. With the technology in demand, there is a huge demand for professionals who have great skills around this or who can learn and master the skills around it. Now, mastering these technologies can help you build a good career in the DevOps space and in the IT industry. But why should you learn Dockers? Why Kubernetes? How to get started and master these technologies? To understand more about Docker and Kubernetes, we have our today's guest, Fazlur Rahman Khan, who is a specialist and a corporate trainer on Docker and Kubernetes. Fazlur comes with 17 plus years of experience in the corporate industry, working in the IT infrastructure space. He is a corporate trainer and a technical consultant. He is certified on Kubernetes like CKA and CKS certifications, and he is also Red Hat Linux certified RHCSA. He comes with amazing knowledge and great passion for teaching on these technologies, and he has been able to teach, coach, mentor more than hundreds of professionals till date. Fazlur, welcome to Dream Career Talk Show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Fatah. Thank you for your kind words and a kind introduction. Thank you.
Great, good to have you here, Fazlur. And yes, the other thing what I wanted to tell the audience is also that Fazlur has been one of my school college mate. We did engineering together, and he's an amazing person. Comes with a lot of experience and the heart to give back to this society. So thank you, Fazlur, for being here and sharing your experiences and learning today to help all the professionals out there. So before we get into Dockers and Kubernetes in the technology piece, let's understand about your career journey. How did you get started in your career, and what led to you getting into coaching and then into Dockers, Kubernetes, all of this?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Fatah, for having me on the show. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. You've been doing an amazing job guiding people to get to the right careers. I really appreciate that. So coming about me, I passed out my engineering maybe around 2003, 2004. Then I started working as a database guy, a database administrator. And when I joined an organization, I was a junior level engineer there, junior software engineer, and I got sucked into database technology called as Progress Open Edge. Not many people would have heard about it. It's kind of legacy, not that much popular, but yes, it does exist, right? So I started working on that, and I've got sucked into it more into that, and I kept working on Progress. And while doing that, I also got my MTech done, and things were rolling good, and I was stuck with this database technology for a while. I can't say stuck per se. I was working on this technology for a while, and I realized that world is moving much forward, and this technology was not taking me anywhere. But then that's the only option we had at that time too, right? Had to, that's how I kind of got started and started building my career. I worked with quite a good companies around the globe. I worked with the companies like JP Morgan Chase. I worked with companies like Iron Mountain and Altisource and things like that. So that was a short brief about my career. And while I was at the database, and I started looking at the infrastructure around as well, and then I started looking at a little bit of Linux, a little bit of storage. Things excited me, everything surrounding the database, and that's how the curiosity got me to where I am right now.
Interesting, interesting. But then corporate life, good life there. You said you worked for some of the top companies. Around 17 years you had been there. Now,
Yeah.
what inspired you to get into coaching, and why Kubernetes, why Dockers? Like, how did this technology inspire you, and how did coaching industry inspire you to get here?
Yeah, yeah. I started when I relate myself, and then when I look at my peers who started along with us. We started together, right? So 2000-ish was the boom of IT, where all of us got into a lot of these Infosys and all of the big companies out there. And then we got assigned to some roles, what we've got, and then we excelled in that. And technology is something which is constantly moving forward, but our pressures, our job pressures, or maybe our family pressures, career pressures kept us little focused, and we could not really look at larger picture, the new technologies which were evolving, right? And I also see a lot of my friends also in the similar space, and mine being a little special case, I was working on a legacy technology which was kind of non-existent, almost, I could say, right? Now many opportunities as well, and that got me thinking, like, how do I do, what do I do? And that was the era of cloud. Last 4 5 years we've seen how the cloud technology has really taken over the world, and things have changed. The way the softwares were being built is changed. The way it used to be traditionally, when we joined, the monolithic architecture kind of moved on towards the multi-tier, and the development architecture also, and the process moved from waterfall models to agiles, and now it's a DevOps world, right? And I also, you would look at it from far and say maybe the cloud is something new, but always felt like maybe it's not our league, maybe felt a little older for that, because we've been doing what we've been doing, and we were really good at doing what we were doing, right? So change always
Right.
is a barrier I didn't want to get into. And I realized most of my colleagues are also in a similar situation where, they want to learn new things, they want to move away, but the other things keep them tied up too. When I realized, when I can do it myself, me being maybe, if you know me much better, we've been done the school together, college together, maybe I would rank myself in the lower order of the people out there, right? So when I can learn something new, when I can excel in that, I thought, why not help others to do it as well, right? That's where the thought came into, and it's time to give back to community. We've spent 17 18 years out there doing what we could do. Now is the time for people who are maybe stuck like this, maybe who want to move away, make a career change, and maybe a little scared to do and leave, understand and learn new technologies. That's what got me thinking and got me to this field. And it's been a wonderful journey, I should say. Last couple of years I've been doing this full time, coaching and mentoring people on various technologies. It's very fun. And we have that mental block that, we come from a legacy technologies, or maybe we are good at what we are, we don't want to change, but the world is moving much faster. And I was talking to you the other day, we were looking at one of the survey out there. The way the cloud is taking over the world, the way the cloud technologies, the cloud native tools are taking over the world is amazing. If not now, we will stay behind. So it's right time to do the transition. And it's not that tough too. Like you have me as an example, right? If I can move away from progress, which was very legacy technology, and then dive right into it and do it, so I'm sure others can as well.
Inspiring, very inspiring, right? Where you are talking about how did you get started into this particular industry and the intent that you have to help others who are stuck in their careers, right? And also, I think though you have been just talking about what people can do, but I think there is a strong message where you are giving to people that whoever is in the legacy technologies, right? If you are getting stuck there, there is an opportunity out there, the cloud and the other technologies, right? And they can anytime learn. That's the message out there, right? They can anytime learn, they can also master that skill and then move out and then do something really big in their own careers.
Yep,
So
yep,
good.
exactly, exactly, yes.
Right, great. And now Kubernetes, Dockers, we are talking about all of this. First of all, what is Docker? Why should somebody learn this?
All right, very very interesting question. But for that, you've got to give me like 4 or 5 minutes. I've got to go back and then come from the way things have evolved over time, right? Traditionally, I hope that's okay with you for that. If you give me three
Perfectly
minutes, I
fine.
can. Yeah,
Yeah.
all right. Like I was mentioning, the way things were, the way the IT started booming, like maybe early 80s and early 90s, the way we ran our softwares, the way we developed our softwares, were more of like a monolithic architecture where all of the software was bundled into together. And maybe the models what we learned in colleges were like the waterfall models is what we used to follow to develop and build and test and deploy our applications as well. And we didn't have enough technology out there to run safely and securely multiple applications together on the same server. So mainly these applications would be, a single tenant and would run on one physical server. That's how they were earlier. We didn't have enough technology per se, right? And things started changing in the early 90s, where VMware Inc. came in and they gave the gift to the world of hypervisor, where you could make use of the same infrastructure what you had, and you could create your virtual machines. And with that, the way we were developing our software also was changing. From the waterfall models, we were moving more towards agile, listening more to the market and trying to go back to the market, deploy your software much faster way compared to the traditional ways. And while doing that, the architecture also changed from a monolithic to maybe multi-tier. And virtual machines helped us to deploy and run these applications in a separate servers itself, again leveraging the same utilized underutilized hardware what we had. And and over the time, the methodology of the way we develop our applications also changed. That was the cloud era, like 5 6 years back, and that's where Docker started picking up, and that's where we are right now. So the way the model what has happened right now is, from your agile models, we're more looking from the DevOps kind of a model, where you have the microservices, you have large applications broken down into smaller applications, smaller services, which interact and work together and then give you a meaningful application. Now you might ask me why, what is the benefit of this, right? A larger application broken down into smaller chunks would give us more ease of developing and building them. The whole different services I can have, I can build them individually, I can deploy them individually, I can scale them up individually based on need. It's pretty cool. And that's where containers come into play. Virtual machines were great. They gave us the sense of isolation what we wanted. They let us run our application separately, but they came with the overhead of operating system. With the microservices model coming up, for every microservice, if I start deploying them in each virtual machine, it is going to cost us too much of an overhead just to run a tiny microservice in one server. That's where your containers came into play, where you do not have the overhead of the operating system per se, what you have in virtual machine, but we also get the isolation what we need to run our applications. That's where Docker comes into play. And mind you, this technology did exist even before Docker made containers popular. These are the Linux kernel features, like to name few of them, maybe like namespaces, chroot, union file system. You have Linux kernel modules like capabilities. All these technologies existed, and Docker is the one which made it. We didn't have like a CLI tool or maybe something which we could interact with and make our containers much easier. So we did have the technologies, what I'm trying to tell you, but Docker came in and gave us a good CLI and an easier way of creating and managing and running our applications. So the advantage of running them in the container, right? If you give me one more minute on this topic, the problem statement really what it solves is, like, we've developed applications, better. Whenever we run some code, right, it works absolutely fine in my machine, in our machine. We deploy it to some testing server out there, we put it out there in production, things break. Maybe it doesn't work with the same optimization, or some link stops working. We've all been there, right? And then the blame game starts, that, hey, it works in my machine, it doesn't work there, I don't know if it's working here, take a look at it, right? That's one of the classical problem as well, what we developers have faced over the time, right? The problem with that is, when I was writing the code, maybe I didn't take into consideration what I already had on my server, maybe, right? I had some binaries which I had installed from a previous build, and it worked fine. But the new server, it went to production, those libraries and binaries, the dependencies were not there, and the code, you know, couldn't work there, right? So Docker tries to attempt to solve this problem by packaging all of your application. So what we do, when we want to run our software, our code in our virtual machines, we just had the source code, we converted that to a exe executable, right? We've compiled the code, we got the executable, that's what we ran, right? To run that inside a container, we've got to convert it into something called as an image. And in that image, when we build the image, we put everything the application needs, your dependencies, your binaries, like whatever the application needs to run, you make it as a template, as an image, which is read only in nature. So you take the template, you go create a container out of that, it runs fine. The way it ran in my computer would run exactly same in your computer as well, because when we created that template, we have added everything we needed, and that's immutable, that's read only. So you take it anywhere, you deploy and run a container, it's going to run exactly the same. That's one of the most easiest benefit, right? And then you have places like where you can keep them, like Docker Hub is one of the registry out there, where you can keep your images and you can share with your teams and people. And all people need to run that application is maybe just a computer which has Docker installed in it. Pull the image, run the container, your software comes up in a matter of seconds. I can maybe show you some examples later when we move along. If you permit me to do that, I maybe can do that as well. Yeah.
Right. Wow, this is excellent. The way you have, like, in couple of minutes, the way you have shared from the time we started and where we are today and how Dockers are being used. Now, if you have to understand from virtualization to containerization, right, what is the biggest difference that you have to talk about here? Because
Oh,
virtual, you talk about the servers, the operating system, but what is that big difference here?
right. So virtualization, if you really look at it, right, it is virtualizing the hardware. We had the underlying infrastructure. We got something called as hypervisor, which sat on top of your infrastructure, and it virtualized and let you create the virtual machines. What really virtual machines gave me is the isolation. Earlier, if I just go back behind, traditionally the way things were before virtual machines, I didn't have enough technology where I could run safely and securely multiple applications on the same server. Say maybe I wanted to run my database on Linux and I wanted to run my uh, front end in some other Windows, maybe, for example, right? So I had to buy two different servers. That's the only option I had traditionally, right? Hypervisors came in, they gave me an isolation, the same hardware. I could create two virtual machines out there. One was running Windows, one was running Linux. They worked fine. In a way, they gave me a sense of isolation where the same hardware, though, they're utilizing the same CPUs and same memories and all of that, but two different isolated environments where I could run things separately. And whatever I was running on virtual machine one had no impact on virtual machine two. Right? I could install Java
Right.
version here, Java version, other version out there. It worked fine. They gave us that isolation, right? But they came with little overhead, and that is your operating system. The operating systems per se started consuming more than what my application logic would need. Maybe to take an example, maybe I need to run a web server. Takes like tops of 200, 300 megs of memory to run it optimally. But I got to give 2 to 3 GB of memory just for my operating system to boot up and run. On top of it is
Right.
where I'm running the web server, and that's the waste of my resources going there. One or two servers, we're okay. We're talking about multiples of them and multiple services to run on them. That makes it waste of our resources, which could be put to better use, and containers come into play. Where containers, they are in a method of virtualizing your operating system. They share the same operating system of your host machine, and they give you similar, not exactly the same, similar isolation environment where you could run your application safely and securely. What is running inside container one has nothing to do with what is running in the container two. They are two different environments. That's what we wanted, and that's why we went to virtual machines as well. That's what they gave us, but they came with some overhead. Containers do similar, but not exactly the similar same level of isolation though. But they give me enough isolation where I can run my application safely and securely. That's a primary difference between your virtual machine and a container, if I have to put that in a couple of words.
Right. And when you were talking about the coming from the era that we started with, and then virtualization, containerization, right? You were talking about a few things which I could relate from my Red Hat Linux journey, right? A lot of those things were already there in Linux, right? How did Docker evolve, and what is it
Oh,
all about, and how it is being used today?
well, that's a pretty interesting, right? So Docker, what they were doing, like we were talking about the technologies out there, the kernel modules were already present in the Linux kernel out there, right? Like I said, few of them like namespaces, capabilities, chroot, union file system, right? I can still make use of them and create container as well. Maybe if I start doing that, maybe it takes me a half an hour to create a container. I can still do it as of today as well, making use of those features. And before the Dockering became Docker, they were known as Cloud. They were a platform as a service company, and they were providing their services to end user in the form of containers. They were making use of these Linux containers, LXCs, what you call them in the short. They were making use of those libraries and talking to your kernel modules, getting those things done. And that's how their platform as a service as a business was running. And over the time, they had a tool to manage these containers, and that what tool was the Docker. And then they realized the popularity of the tool, and they had done that to manage their containers and stuff like that. And they realized the way that Docker is helpful and the way it is, changing things for them. They rebranded the company from .cloud to Docker Inc. And they got rid of their platform as a service as the company, and then they started focusing on bringing Docker to the world. And they gave us a easy CLI and a very easier way of doing things compared to what we can do. So, and also not to mention that Google also did contribute to a lot of Linux kernel related technologies around the containerization. They've been running their applications at scale. You know, the Gmails, the Google search, what you use, all of those applications are running in containers. They also did contribute to a lot of the Linux kernel features out there and enhancing all of that. Docker leveraged those kernel features and made that popular out there. And then as we speak today, if I will show you, if you allow me to numbers, they are mind blowing. The kind of images what put on Docker Hub, a centralized place where you can keep your images, user defined, and we also have images from Docker Hub, and the amount of downloads, the pulls, what are happening, and billions of images are getting pulled, and more than 9 million users created their accounts just in a couple of quarters. So that's how the numbers
Wow,
are.
that's amazing. Maybe we can have a look at the numbers. I would be happy to look at them as well.
Yeah. Let me see if I can pull that out for you. Trying to share the number what you see on the screen, right? This is the blog I picked up from the Docker, right? Docker documentation, right? It talks about so far from 2013-14 when they came out and started becoming popular out there. So far, it is 396 billion. The B is the billion there. That's the number of pulls.
Wow.
The images what people have kept, or images what Docker has kept it for you. That's the number of images which have been pulled. In the last quarter alone, the Q2 of 21, we had 42 billion pulls. Things have evolved over time. It used to be like 10 billion or 9 billion pulls a quarter. It's 42 billion. And also, if I show you a couple of surveys, I mean, we can just Google it. The fastest growing technology, the container technology, Docker is on top of there. And 9 million accounts were created in last quarter alone. But that itself tells you the popularity of where we're going, right?
Yeah. This number is like mind blowing,
Yes,
right? The way it has grown, and especially the quarter two of 21. If I see 42 billion,
yeah,
right, the
yeah,
Docker Hub pulls. This is amazing. I think this is one of the fastest growing,
yes.
and I think that's the reason. Like a lot of people today getting into Dockers, Kubernetes. We hear this very often,
Mhm.
right? And we hear about DevOps as a
Yeah,
technology also. Like every organization is moving towards.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where even our Kubernetes comes into play as well. And that's a tool. You have too many containers out there. You need some tools to manage these containers, deploy your applications and provide you all of those features out there. And Kubernetes as a tool does all of that. And that also is one of the most popular technology, the cloud technology on the planet as we speak. Simple Google search would maybe get us that number. And let me see if I can pull that out number for you as well. Maybe I'll pull that out when we go to Kubernetes. Sorry about that.
Okay, so that's perfectly fine. So now coming back to because you were talking about Docker coming from Linux, right? And if I remember, one of the reasons the popularity of Linux was, one is the open source, and the second one is the communities that Linux have, where you can go reach and all of that.
Right.
So what makes Docker more popular today? Like, do they have their own communities? How is the support provided? What is it all about?
Yep, yep. Just like all of the leading of the cloud software is what we have. Docker also has a couple of editions out there. You also have the community editions, which me and you can use. The small teams, the individual teams, the startups can use. Right, and there's amazing community support out there. You also have the enterprise editions of those, where if you pay some dollars, you get some more benefits out of that. So, community has been amazing. The way things have evolved over short 5 4 5 years, the way the Dockers have grown, the numbers speaks for themselves. Right? And similarly for Kubernetes as well, you'll name the company. That's the tool itself has come uh, from Google, right? That the Kubernetes was a Google project, and then they made that open source in 2014, and that shows. And there's a lot of widespread adoption, and all the leading companies out there are the or major contributors for that particular project. And there's a very very wide community support. And CNCF is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which owns the project Kubernetes, right? If you just visit the website cncf.io, it talks about how many millions of code has been contributed by this community. And also, like you've been an architect as well, like I've been too. And that's one of the things what we look at as well, right? When we are deciding any tool what we've got to use, if there's no community support, that means there's no adaptation of that, and we look for that. And then these tools do have very awesome community support out there. And also you do have enterprise support as well. And and every day things are changing, things are evolving, new technologies around these. And the good part about Kubernetes as well, and Docker as in general, is they're more hookable and pluggable and stuff like that. So you have your own uh, customized software out there. You can configure it to talk to each other, and it gives you a lot of benefits where you can do things easily and customize it per your need as well.
Hmm. And you have been talking about Kubernetes, right? Now, how is Docker and Kubernetes like? How are these connected, and why should somebody like use Kubernetes?
Uh-huh. Very nice question, right? So these two are complementary technologies. So you build your application, you package that in the image in the way the container understands, in the way you want to run inside the container, and you run it on a container. That's where your Docker comes into play, which helps you package it, build it, ship it, and run your containers, right? Deploy and run in a containers. When I'm running a standalone machine, maybe standalone containers, few containers per se, like 10, 20, 30, 40. I can run on a standalone Docker host. Just to give you an example, if I have 5 or 6, 10, 20 of virtual machines, I would manage them manually. But if there are too many of them, maybe I need a virtual machine manager or hypervisor manager, which does manages a lot of virtual machines, right? Similar when I'm talking about deploying my application at scale, and then we're talking about hundreds and thousands of containers, and it becomes challenging where we have so many containers out there spread across multiple hosts. We need some tool which can monitor and deploy and do your scheduling, keep an eye on what's going on, and self heal if things break, auto scale, and things like that. Kubernetes is one such tool which help us deploy and run these containers. So in a way, these two are complementary technologies. You build your application using Docker and you run them inside containers. That's where Docker comes into play. But how to run them, how to deploy them, how to manage, monitor them is where Kubernetes comes into play. So
Interesting. And like, what is this architecture all about? Like, how does the architecture look, and how are like Kubernetes and Dockers? Like, can you explain in that terms? And also, if
yeah,
you can give some real life example from one of the scenarios, like maybe some Amazons, or the Googles, or the Netflix, right? Any example that you can pick where we can understand how this technology is applied can also be great.
Sure. So from the technology, the architecture point of view, the Docker is a similar, simple architecture where it uses this the client server. You build your images. To build your image, you need something called a Docker file. Docker file is more of a recipe, I can say. Like if I want to create some dish out there, maybe I write down what I need to do, add some sugar, add some salt, and stuff like that, right? That's a recipe what we have. Similar, we've got to have a Docker file which defines everything, how my application would look like, what binaries I need to install, how do I run, what ports do I use, all of that in a recipe. It's called a Docker file, and I execute that. I build that Docker file. I create something called as a template, right? And I that is that for that is what we call as a Docker image, and using that Docker image, which is immutable in nature, we convert that and run that as a container. That is where my application would run inside, right? So the architecture point of view, we have client and server architecture for Docker, where your client is more of CLI, which it's used to interact with your daemon. It's a Docker engine. Docker engine per se does all the heavy work for you, like building your containers, pulling your images, pushing your images to your centralized registries, and stuff like that. Right? Simple. And when it comes to Kubernetes, it is more of a cluster, right? Multiple nodes, multiple servers or computers running together, right? Just like the regular cluster. If I have to give you a normal example, uh, me being a developer, right, a single developer, I can't. You give me a lot of tasks, I keep doing that, but my project increases, and I alone can't handle it. So you'll maybe hire a couple of more engineers to work along with me and share the load, right? And when we have a lot of larger team, then managing that team becomes a challenge, and you've got to have a manager out there who will look out for us. Maybe he will do the time scheduling for us. Maybe he will allocate some tasks for us. He takes the reporting for us, and he also does the talking to the business unit as well, right? So we have a manager. Similar architecture, if I convert that, is the way Kubernetes is. It has a bunch of nodes which are worker nodes where your containers run, a bunch of nodes out there. When I say nodes, the servers or computers, which act as your manager nodes who manage these worker nodes and get the work done there, monitor them, schedule them, and stuff like that. So it's like a master and worker node. And I believe the terms master and slave can't be used anymore. Not politically correct though. So, so we can use them as a control plane is where your master servers are, and data plane is where your worker nodes are, and that's how the architecture is. And there are many beautiful use cases out there, right? If I start talking about them, maybe we will end up taking all of the time. What I would do is, if you go to the website of the Kubernetes project, that CNCF, right? CNCF.io is their website. If you just look at the use case studies, right? And one of the popular app what we have in India, Zerodha, which has been quite popular of late for the stock market trading and stuff like that. They also leverage these cloud native tools out there, right? Do you have a use case of them? Netflix uses them. We have millions of users. A new series comes out there, maybe Sacred Games. I'm just putting the names out there, and you have million people out there, maybe in India, maybe a couple of billion also, maybe waiting for them, right? And that provides you the scalability where you can stream across billions of screens out there. How does that work? Traditionally, the way we had built our servers, every time something we wanted to, we had to put the servers out there. The way things have evolved is amazing. Million users. There was one cricket match happening the other day. There were a billion users hooked onto it, and everybody was streaming it. That's how the technology has changed over time, and all of them run inside your containers out there. And then Kubernetes is managing all of those hundreds and thousands and millions of containers which are spawned out there, and scaling automatically and running seamlessly. It's amazing. For more case studies, if you really want to, if you're interested, and the audience who are looking at it as well, just look at the cncf.io. That's the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. That's the organization of the project which owns Kubernetes and other cloud native projects out there. You can look at the case studies on there. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's very interesting out there.
Yeah. So we did talk a lot about technology. Now I just want to understand, Fazlur, you were talking about you were working for some legacy tools, right?
Mhm.
And then you were doing good there, but then you wanted that change. Now a lot of people get stuck with legacy tools
Right.
because their career is really going good because there are only few people who can work there, so they are paid well, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that becomes like a trap. How can
Yeah.
people come out of this, and why do you think it's important for people to take that step where they actually start investing in themselves and start learning new technologies and tools out there?
Right. And I was in the trap too. When you brought that out, I was excited.
Yeah.
And I was paid really, really well. And I was in the legacy technology. That acted like a trap for me. I couldn't really get out of that because the money was good, right? But the way things have changed recently, if you look at it, if you just go to Google and just do a Google search on the jobs available on Kubernetes, right? Maybe you're looking from US or UK or India, whatever. Just go to Google search as we speak, and you just look at the amount of jobs what we have, right? On the search, what you see, you'll see more than 1,000 plus jobs out there. And if you just look at the average salary for a Kubernetes security specialist or a Kubernetes administrator out there, or a Docker developer who has maybe tools like Docker and Kubernetes, you look at the average salaries used to be for a developer. We've been there too, like 75, 90K dollars. You look at that now when it respect to the tools what we have, it goes around 150K. I'm talking about the base, not talking the really high salaries as well. That's how things have changed. So that can be a motivation for us, many of us. But I would say the way the technology is changing, this is going to take over. So you've got to, use it or lose it. If you don't move forward, you will get stuck behind. And believe me, the transition is not really, really that hard. We all do understand. It's the same server at the end of the day, right? It's the same Linux what we have we used to. It's just the way we're running things is a little different. So it's no rocket science. Like I keep telling, when I can do it, others can do it as well. It's all you need is a consistent will. Maybe you dedicate a half an hours of time, and then look at the time when we hardly had technology out there, right? I mean, resources out there. The internet was so scarce. Now everybody has resources. You look at the YouTube, you don't have to spend money as well. You don't want to come to mentors like us, it's fine. You go to YouTube's, you look at the internet. It is filled with data. All it needs is your will and willpower to maybe spend some time, like 15-20 minutes, and then you should be able to do that.
But one thing, Fazlur, when you're talking about you can look at YouTube, right? Now we know information is in abundance, right?
Right.
But I think that is also one of the big challenge for a lot of people,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because they don't know what to look at, and then if they are spending a lot of time on that, and they don't really know what is the step one and the step two,
Right.
right? They are again and again going in the loop, right? And they get caught up there. So I think information era is good, but then information people are getting lost is one of the
Oh,
big challenge out there,
yeah,
right?
I totally agree. 100% agree with you. I just put that out just for people, just to give them little comfort that there is something out there. I mean, compared
Right.
to what we had, right? If me
Right,
and
definitely.
you in our era, we wanted to go do things out there, we didn't really know what to do, right? We didn't have access to resources. Having said that, there's too many videos, also too much of information as well. I understand that. I just wanted to make them feel comfortable that you
Right.
have the will. There are resources out there,
Right,
and I
right. I think
understand
that
that.
that's really good, and I understand from where you are coming from, the place where you are at the comfort zone and trying to come out, and then making that push for yourself. Now, one of the challenge, Fazlur, when I see the people in the mid careers, right, they have this crisis because I handle mid career professionals.
Yeah.
Is people are always looking for what is their company providing them in terms of trainings, and that is where if somebody is in the legacy tool, right, the company would not want to train them on the other tools, because if they train, then they are gone, right? So how
Yes.
do people take care of their own career, and how do they take those steps that they can grow? Like, what are the steps
Right.
that you can suggest if somebody wants to get into this?
Yeah. Yeah. Your career is in your hands, right? Company is going to take care of you for as long as they need you, right? And then
Right.
the tool goes away. Maybe what legacy tool you're working on, they will shut shop, and then you will have to fend for yourself. It's better to do that when you're still getting paid doing all of that. Take off your weekends, and then you can spend a couple of hours a day, and that should be great.
Yeah,
That should
makes
be
sense,
you
because
should be able to. Yeah, that's how I started off as well. And then there are lots of documentations available, a lot of videos. Like you said, we don't know where to look at. That's where mentors come into play. They can maybe guide you, they handhold you, and then of course they'll hold the hand for you, but you've got to do all the other jogging what you have to do.
right, perfectly said. And I think the very important point you made is you take the ownership of your career and you take it ahead rather than depending on your company. Because if the
Yeah.
legacy tool is gone, the story is shut down, then you have
Yes.
to find your own ways. So do it before people actually ask you to walk out, or the companies ask you to walk out. And
Yeah.
since you have
And
been
also,
working with, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry about that. It also gives you enough confidence as well, right? And then we start to feel, as we grow older, the new generation coming in, new technologies and new tools coming in, we feel that maybe we are left behind, right? It's not really that, because whatever experience what we had is not going to go waste. We've been there, we've learned the hard way. Of course, there are tools now which makes things easier. You and me have written code out there. The way we used to write code 20 years back was different. Now we have so many tools, click of a couple of buttons, everything is popping out there, right? So it's just that we have to not think too much about it, and then start focusing on learning new things. It gives you confidence. Don't have a larger, per se, like, if you want to do all of these course, you look at something, you want to crack the certification in a month, that's fine. But I would say the way I would look at it is take a small baby steps. And once you keep adding one step after other, it gives you enough confidence. And that mind block what we have, that we come from a legacy technology. Can I fit into this? Look at the youngsters who are doing much better. Those kind of things are going to go away if you start achieving smaller steps. Like they take baby steps.
Right. And since you have been dealing with a lot of professionals in terms of training on these technologies, right? If somebody is there on a different technology and want to make a shift in this, right? What is the step-by-step process that helps them? Like, I'm sure you would have dealt with people coming maybe from Java or any legacy
Right.
tool. How do they take this step-by-step process and get into DevOps and then make a point there and then also build their career into that?
Right. So that, see, when you say DevOps, I would say DevOps more from the from the model point of view, right? It's a combination of the way the philosophies and the practices and the tools, which increases your organization's ability to deliver your application and services. That's how the DevOps model has been, to build, test, and release at a faster pace, right? That's more of, I could say, the way. If I am working in an organization which does not practice DevOps as a philosophy and stuff like that, makes it a little difficult for me. But that's not the stopping point. Is what I wanted to tell. You can make use of the tools what you have, and there are many tools out there. You can start learning one of them, and start building on top of them.
But what would be the core skills if they have to like get started with? Whether it would be Linux, whether it would be database, like what are the skills that
Uh,
if they
Okay,
have it, then it helps them like better,
right. Understanding of computers is enough.
right?
Yes, I mean it might sound silly, but it doesn't matter, right? Like if I'm a Java developer, I was writing my code, converting them as the executables running out there on servers. I can containerize them and run them in containers. That's where the whole world is going. That's where all our softwares are growing too. So it doesn't matter. Maybe I was a database guy, and then I could not really containerize my database because of the limitations of technology. That's changing too. If you go to Docker Hub, which is a centralized place where we keep our Docker images, where you can download them and push them as well. If you go look at the MySQLs, the Mongos, the Cassandras, what the amount of pulls what they have in billions, the counter stops. when you reach 1 billion download per se, that's the amount of popularity what they have. So the point is, no matter where you're coming from your database world. You were running databases on servers before virtual machines. You were running them on the physical servers, then you moved them to virtual machines. Eventually, you've got to move them to containers too, right? You're
Right.
writing code, you're writing your applications for your servers, you're writing them for containers. Things are going to evolve that way, and it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Linux, Windows doesn't matter. It's cross platform portable. It works fine. Of course, if you have more of a Linux, I'm the Linux guy, so I would recommend Linux as well. If you have Linux, a little bit of background makes your life easier a little bit from a troubleshooting point of view and stuff like that. But it should be okay. Just basic computer knowledge, you can build on top of it.
You seem to be very optimistic here, and thank you for simplifying it, because I think sometimes it's the buzz and sometimes it's the kind of fear people build right around technologies. Oh, DevOps is the new one. DevOps is the latest. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe I may not be able to learn. So thank you for simplifying and giving that hope for people who want to get into this field. And now, if somebody wants to build a career, right, when they get into DevOps, like what are the challenges people get into this? And first of all, let me ask you this. Now many companies, they tell we are practicing DevOps, right? And when you get, you actually, sometimes people tell me there is a shocker, Fatah sir, right? There is no DevOps there, right? There is nothing really called DevOps, right? So
Right.
what is DevOps all about? Like when you talk about, okay, Kubernetes is
Right.
one thing, then Docker is one thing. What other things are there in this particular technology all about?
Right. And I mean, if I want to put it in very, very easy terms, nutshell, right? Traditionally, they were silos. They were separation of duties. Developer would develop. There was somebody in the operations team maybe who will deploy, do the release and stuff like that, right? And those boundaries, or separation of duties, what we had, added a little bit of hindrance, like that delayed the whole process, right? Those silos or those boundaries are taken away right now. A developer guy can also do the operation works. That's the DevOps, the combination of development and operation. It's it's exactly similar the way we were doing things, but when it comes to running your applications and deploying them much faster, when it comes to your microservices, where you can't really wait for a whole month release cycle to push something which is broken out there. That's where you can think of more kind of a philosophy than kind of a technology or architecture in that sense, right?
Right,
It's just the
makes sense.
combination
Yeah.
that the separation of duties are taken out,
Right.
and that
Great.
makes important. Developer earlier who would write his code, he would go home, he would not think about where it is running, how it is running, what framework, what architecture. Things are going to change around that. When I write code right now I've got to think of where it is going to run, how it is going to run, and stuff like that, right? And there are many tools out there, which helps you to do this, right? You have CI/CD integration tools out there, and Docker, Kubernetes are just a couple of building blocks in this whole pipeline. There are different tools, hundreds of tools out there, at every step of the process what we have.
Mhm. And from your experience, like what is the biggest challenge like the people who are working in this particular technologies face, right?
Mhm. One of the challenge, and that's been a bane, because the technology is very awesome, and there is a awesome support out there, and that leads to one problem is the constant evolution of things as well. So you kind of have your minor releases every 3 months, right? And new things come out. Whatever I've learned right now, maybe another 6 months I can. I mean, not really. It's going to phase out, but things are going to evolve faster. So you've got to keep up to it. Not like you learn something, you can't sleep over it. I know the select queries, I can't keep only doing that. Things are fast evolving. So that has been one of the challenge, where if you learn something, you run something, and then you realize in 3 months they're coming out with a new release, maybe deprecating what you were using earlier. So you've got to change things around that. Of course, there are tools which are going to help you to move that way, but that's one of the challenge what I have faced personally as well.
Hmm. And the
Me,
DevOps is a philosophy. Yeah, go ahead. You wanted to say,
sorry,
sorry.
me as a trainer, I make my activity guides what I give for my participants and stuff like that, right? I make that on a version, and how hard work it is. You've got to get these scenarios in place where you teach people, and they can practice all of that what you've taught them in theory, and you build that whole manual out there. The activity guide for them takes a month, and in a couple of months that becomes older for you if the new version comes out, right? So you've got to
Right.
do a little bit of minor work. So that's been a pain for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you were talking about this, I could relate some of my mentees, especially one of my mentee was talking about But I'm able to like learn Jenkins a lot of it from the YouTube channels. But then whenever I'm stuck, I don't know really how to solve this problem. Now, where do Jenkins, Ansible, we know all of these are also like the names taken in the DevOps world today. Like, where do all of these fit?
Right. I mean, they all fit in a model per se. Like, each one has their own role to play. To run your applications you make use of Docker to run them in containers. To manage your containers, you make use of your Kubernetes. If you have your Jenkins, which is a CI/CD server, which will help you create those jobs, execute them, automate around things like that. You make use of Ansible to, deploy or manage and run your applications or your infrastructure, more like infrastructure as a code. So your Terraform also comes into play. Right? But those are different tools which kind of solves different problems of the new world.
Right. And you were talking about Ansible, and Ansible has been one of the tool that's preferred in the automation world. Like, what makes it so preferable, and how can somebody learn even Ansible? Because I know you have been like training people on Ansible as well.
Yeah. That's a very nice popular tool by Red Hat as well. Right? Where you write your playbooks, you write your modules, you automate what you want to do. Right? Say, to give an example, I have 10 servers out there, and I want to deploy a package. Right? Traditionally, we would make use of some tool out there where maybe if we were not smart enough, maybe we would log in into all of those servers, install those packages and stuff like that. Right? And then started new tools coming out specific to those particular softwares what we're using, which would help us click a couple of buttons, deploy them and stuff like that. Right? That's where your Ansible comes into play, where you want to manage your infrastructure as a code. You write everything in your playbooks, you define your inventories, and you say what you want to do and where you want to do, and you run the playbook. It is going to go do all that for you. That's where Ansible comes into play, and it's pretty cool. It makes your life easier when you're talking about managing too many servers out there. Similar tool is a Terraform as well, where you can deploy and provision your infrastructure as a code. You can write some modules out there, just run them, and then it's going to do what you've asked them to do, just in the click of couple of buttons and couple of commands.
So in the automation world now, Ansible is being used, and in Dockers and Kubernetes, I also hear about YAML, right? Where
Mhm.
is this used, and how is this particular thing used there?
Yeah, that's a pretty cool thing. It's a YAML. It stands for yet another markup language or ain't another markup language. It depends on whom you ask, right? It's a simple English like a script where you can define your configurations, like the large commands. What you have, maybe if you want to run something, like say you want to run a pod in Kubernetes, you've got to give the parameters what you want. Assembling that command on the command line, it's cumbersome. Right? You can define all of these configurations in a format which your Kubernetes understands, and that's in the YAML format. The beauty of YAML is it's like a simple plain text English like script what you can write. There are no closing and opening brackets, no tags, no curly brackets, no square brackets, and stuff like that. It uses your Python kind of nesting to indicate the parent and child indentation and stuff like that. And it is more of a English kind of way. And that's why it is popular to most of these tools to write your configurations. Like Kubernetes uses your YAML and JSON as well. Ansible uses your YAML. You look at the latest software developed, defined networks or storages. They all use YAML for their configurations. Not another language which you have to learn. Just few basic syntax if you know that it is case sensitive. You can't use tab spaces. Few of those if you know, you should be good about that.
Mhm. So we have been talking about all these technologies now, YAML, Ansible, Kubernetes. But then if somebody has to pick up at least two and then go ahead, you say Kubernetes and Docker is something that can help them in their careers.
Absolutely. I would say pick with Docker, understand what containerization is, and once you have a grip of that, is where Kubernetes comes into play, where you learn how to orchestrate and manage those containers out there on multiple servers.
And since you have been into these trainings, like how much is the typical time period if somebody has to learn this, right, and then get started in their career? Maybe somebody already into some other job, right, in the IT or the non-IT world, want to get into this. How much time typically would it take?
Well, I mean, that really depends on the person's interest per se. But just to keep it very generic for for from my point of view, for a person like me, I would say spend a month, maybe 2 hours a day. And I understand when you're working and you have families and all of that, 2 hours a day maybe is tough. I would say dedicate 4 hours a week, maybe on a Saturday or a Sunday, and do it for 8 weeks. That should get you started and give you a better understanding. From a beginner, you can take yourself to intermediate in a month's time. provided you give, you know, 4 weeks of time and 4 hours each day when you do that. Let's
Great.
say
I
each of
think
your week.
yeah, yeah. I think that's good if somebody can do it in 8 weeks, and that's when somebody has a trainer like you. And I would definitely like recommend people if somebody is looking for learning on Kubernetes or Docker, right? Fazlur has been already into the training world and training a lot of people, and comes with immense knowledge. So you can definitely reach out to him. And Fazlur, we have had a great discussion, right, on all of these technologies. But before we conclude the session for the day,
Yeah.
anything that you want to share with the audience, any last message?
Yep. Don't just believe in yourself. If you're stuck in your mid career, you know what to do, right? You've got to reach out to Fatah. Just calling out to my man. You've got to reach out to Fatah. I mean, the point is, it's all about the mindset, right? A little bit of mentoring, a little bit of handholding, you can go places, right? We all have that potential. It's just that we don't unlock it. You just need that. It's just like the light is out there. There is a power, but you don't have the power. You're not switching on the power button. Just hit the button. There will be light all over the place. That's all I can say. Don't get stuck. Pick up what you've wanted to do all along, and then start moving on. And you need mentors. There are plenty of them. Fatah is one of them. I would say, reach out to him and then take it forward from there.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for recommendation. But yes, I think there is a powerful message, whatever you have given, right? Whenever you want to get started, like wherever you want to get started, it's just that everything is in your hand. It's like a click of a button. You want to get started, take actions, right? Get started with from wherever you are. And I think you will be able to bring whatever change in your life and get to wherever you want. So that's a powerful message. Thank you, Fazlur, for giving that message. And thank you for sharing some great insights around that. And people, yes, thank you for joining us, especially Mohammad Nayaz, Freddy, Nanta for joining live and then sharing your comments as well and encouraging and appreciating this conversation. And people who are going to watch us later, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this conversation. And if you want to get started with your career or if you want to make a transition from any legacy tool, getting into Dockers and Kubernetes, here is the man, Fazlur Rahman Khan. You can always reach out to him via LinkedIn. I'm going to share the LinkedIn details as well. Fazlur, do you mind putting that out here so that
Yeah.
people can pick that and then they can take it from there? Your LinkedIn details, or they can search you with Fazlur Rahman Khan. And should they put any Docker Kubernetes along with that if they have to find you?
Yes, yes. If they just get my name and then the Docker, that should get them there.
Okay. Great. All right. Thank you for being with us and sharing all those insights and knowledge, immense knowledge that you have shared with us. Thank you. And
Thank
thanks,
you for
everybody. Yeah. Go
thank you
ahead,
for
please.
having me for that.
Yeah. Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us and people who are going to watch us later. Thank you for that. And stay tuned for we will bring you more industry experts so that they can share their knowledge, their experiences, and their success stories so that it can inspire you and it can help you to build your dream careers. So thank you and stay safe. Good night.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.